Welcome, welcome, welcome to A Deeper Dive with me. I'm Dara, and today's special guest is Nick Iarossi, owner and co-founder of Capital City Consulting. He is a lobbyist extraordinaire who also served as co-chair of Governor Ron DeSantis's finance committee for his presidential campaign. And Nick is going to give us a deep dive. We're going to take a deep dive with Nick into Governor Ron DeSantis's presidential campaign, the impact he's had on the 2024 legislative session after he came back to Florida after dropping out of the race. Nick's going to give us some scooplets on some legislation that's percolating still in the run up to the last week of the session. We'll talk about some of the things we'll hit on: vacation rentals, vape, hemp, social media, and much, much more.
Now lobbyists are starting to employ other tactics other than just face-to-face meetings. It's utilizing the media, utilizing social media.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
Giddy up, partners. Deeper Dive is on the road today, and I am sitting here in the very swanky office with my old pal Nick Iarossi at Capital Consulting.
Capital City Consulting.
Capital City Consulting. How could I botch that right out of the gate? That does not bode well for me, folks. But we are right outside the Capitol, so we're going to just jump right in, say hi to Nick. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Dara. Good to be with you.
Great to have you with us today. Nick, how long have you been lobbying in Tallahassee?
This will be my 24th year lobbying.
So for people who are not our regular Tallahassee insiders, I don't know if there are any, I just need to let you all know that Nick is probably the most influential lobbyist in Tallahassee right now. If not the most, I don't know who is. So take that, Brian Ballard. And just talk a little bit, real briefly, about what the biggest driver of change has been over the past 24 years since you've started lobbying.
Oh, there's been a few big events. One would be term limits. Probably had the most drastic impact on the way lobbying has been done. I mean, when I came into this, I went to FSU undergrad in law school and went straight into lobbying out of law school. I'd worked in the Capitol through law school, so was familiar with the process and how it operated prior to term limits. And it was tougher for a young person to get involved in lobbying because most of the legislators, both in the House and Senate, were a lot older and had relationships with lobbyists and other folks for decades. So it was hard to break into. But my timing was good. You know, term limits kind of kicked in right around the time that I started. So there was a lot of turnover in the legislature that gave opportunities for younger people to get involved. So kind of took advantage of that. And it changed the way things are done quite a bit in that you have to get out on the road, you have to raise a lot of money. That's a big piece of it is fundraising. Get to know these future legislators while they're candidates, because this turnover that they have every 8 years is significant.
Right.
So you got to keep refreshing relationships. I think the other thing that really changed things is the lobbyist gift ban. You know, the fact that, when
I see this is when I love this when my guests jump ahead for no, don't apologize. That's how it's supposed to go.
But that was significant. I mean, so I think the two biggest things, I would say there's three things. One would be the implementation of term limits. Two would be the lobbyist gift ban, because the ability to entertain members of the legislature and staff was one way that lobbyists got to know people. When you take that off of the table, then fundraising becomes more significant, because you can't build relationships through having meals, because you can't ask everybody to go to expensive dinners with you and pay out of their pocket to do it. It's also harder to get to know staff because back when I first started, I mean, we'd cater in meals to House and Senate staff and the committees, and you drop by and get to know them and kind of create goodwill and build relationships with those people. Now that's a lot harder to do. So it's much more impersonal, I would say, now than when I initially started a couple decades ago. But the fundraising aspect of it has gotten significantly more important because that's how you build those relationships.
And has that really posed a problem for some smaller lobbying shops because they can't really write the kind of checks, the 100,000, the 50,000, the 25,000 even is a stretch for some of the smaller, single lobbyist or folks who aren't, raking in whatever gazillions.
It is. I mean, some of the smaller lobbying shops who are unable to raise those dollars really relied on the relationship building through, dinners and receptions and things like that were much more prolific during the days prior to the gift ban. So it is harder for people to build those relationships who aren't able to raise or write those dollars. I think the third aspect of lobbying I've seen really change over time is access to information and media. Right, when I first started lobbying, we were going to get amendments from bill drafting.
Oh, I remember those days. I was there.
There was no texting. There was, was none of the kind of modern conveniences of electronics that we have now that provide instantaneous information flow that make you better at doing your job. Right, it's harder to sneak things through without people noticing them as far as amendments go and all. I mean, now you have Boolean word searches and software to track things and AI now to track things. So it makes it a lot more difficult to sneak things through, which I think is good for better government. It also, that information flow makes things move much quicker. And what I mean by that is, now lobbyists are starting to employ other tactics other than just face-to-face meetings. It's utilizing the media, utilizing social media, utilizing other tactics to try and message from the outside, utilizing third parties to either, to influence legislation one way or the other, to kill it or to pass it.
Yeah, we have an ad on the news service website that's on the podcast website right now about the social media bill.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's
it's a
all
perfect
kinds.
Example.
It is a perfect example,
and that information flow is so is so constant now that a lot of times issues I think that were very difficult to pass over time. Let's take gaming issues for example.
This is how we go in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but gaming. Medical marijuana, gay marriage, when you really start looking at these thorny issues that over time just would not pass and every single year would die and die and die. Once people started having more access to information and got bombarded with messages, there's a desensitization process that takes place, both with the public, but also with their elected representatives. And that desensitizing them to certain issues causes things to move faster. And I think that's happened more exponentially as time has gone on, where legislators are more apt to pass things now than I think they have in the past because of the access to this information.
But isn't that also kind of a function of the shift to the right? This is a supermajority of Republicans. The Republicans have controlled both chambers for more than 20 years. Doesn't their willingness to pass some of these what might be considered more conservative measures reflect a more right focus, a party that has kind of lurched to the right over the past decade?
I think over the last couple years you've seen,
particularly after the election of Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And also I really think just that's a function, I think, a lot of COVID. So if you really look at COVID, and I would add that as actually a fourth prong of how lobbying has changed, because COVID really changed the way we lobby also. We realized that a lot could be done on the telephone or text message. The in-person aspects of meeting with legislators has gotten less prevalent, and not only for us, but they don't want to do it either. They're so crammed with time in the 60-day session, and they've got to get through so many meetings and so much stuff. They'd rather just take a quick phone call, make your pitch on things rather than having to come in and do a meeting that typically takes longer. So more business is being conducted more quickly as a result of COVID, because things have gone more virtual
Right.
and more electronic, which is also different.
Which also is an advantage for you, who has the opportunity to build those relationships on the fundraising side.
Yeah, you have to have the access for them to return your call
Right.
or take your call.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
That's an important piece. But all this information flow, yes, I mean, I do think that, especially over the last couple of years, what COVID did was slow everyone down. Parents were teaching their kids at home, homeschooling, when the schools were closed for the period of time they were. Buildings were closed down, work was closed down. Parents are at home, or people without kids are at home. They're watching the news. They're seeing what their kids are watching on TV, what they're being exposed to. They're also taking notice of the types of things on the news that they're being bombarded with. And people before COVID were going about their lives at 1,000,000 miles per hour and everything was a blur, and they didn't have time to really pay attention or to digest what information flow was coming in. During COVID, it forced everybody to slow down, and they started taking note of the type of content their kids were seeing, what their kids were being taught in school, or how they were being taught in school. For example, Common Core on mathematics. They were having to teach their children. I know I have 2 daughters. I had to try and teach them math using the Common Core method, and I could get to the right answer, but I don't know how to get there the way they wanted to in Common Core. And then you start asking yourself, why are we doing this? What was wrong with the old system? So I think COVID caused people to slow down, and then those social issues about education and the issues of wokeism and the BLM movement, all of that occurred while everybody was at home watching the news. And so that really created a lot of divisiveness within our society about how people felt about those issues. And that's a reflection, because people got more noisy about those issues. And I think Republicans here in the legislature, their push to the right is a reflection of, I think, what society, at least in Florida, happened during the time of
the response to the pandemic. Yeah. That's really interesting, the slowing down thing. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I hadn't really thought of that, because for me, this little old lady living alone at home, my pace of life didn't really change, other than that I didn't really see people. But I see what you're saying now, and I think there is, I don't feel the frenetic pace in the Capitol anymore. We are now less than 10 days out.
Yeah.
You look at the 4th floor, it's practically empty.
It used to look like Mardi Gras back in the old days.
There were pizza boxes and people, with chairs. You couldn't get right from one end of the rotunda to the other. And it just is very, very different. And, it makes, because I used to get a lot of tips, and a lot of information gathering takes place when people are gathered in the rotunda there. And I feel at a disadvantage now to be so distanced, that the process has changed so significantly.
Yeah, but it's your job is really not a lot different than our job, in that you have good relationships with people. You can pick up the phone and call people and get your phone call returned to get information as well, and it really works the same way with us. So we talked a little bit about campaign contributions. Let's talk about Governor Ron DeSantis's campaign. You were a big part of his campaign. You were, I don't know what your official title was. I was a national finance co-chair for the presidential.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about what you did? What was successful, and what would you have done differently?
Well, from the fundraising perspective, we did very well. I mean, we raised tremendous amounts of money.
Boatloads.
Yes, we did. We did very well, and the governor's very good at fundraising. He had a great team around him to be able to fundraise. So, the fundraising side of things was I think done very well, and I'm not sure I would change a lot around that.
And that was your silo.
Yeah, and I think, part of the issue is there was such a demand to give him money from citizens that just the amount of inflow, the incoming from people, was a tremendous, tremendous undertaking to be able to return everybody's phone calls and, give them the attention they need as a donor. Because there were so many people excited about his candidacy. I think The campaign overall, I think, did well. We were running against, incumbent, president who's a cult of personality and is a different guy to get around. And I don't know if, Ronald Reagan was running against Trump this year, it would have made a difference.
Right.
The news media, I think, really covered Trump disproportionately. And if you really look at the outcomes in Iowa, for example, it was strongly a reflection of the earned media that each of the candidates had. Trump, of course, dominating the amount of earned media on conservative networks in particular. And a lot of that was a result of the prosecutions and the indictments.
That's true.
Place. So there's a
So even any press is good press.
Yeah, it is.
Because for his fan base, I call him a fan base.
Mm-hmm.
For Trump's constituency, he's a martyr. He's being persecuted, exactly right. And he gets a bump, I think, from those prosecutions
100%,
rather than
100%. Right. And I saw it firsthand on the campaign trail, and particularly in Iowa. And Iowa is a state that lines up well for Ron DeSantis. It's an evangelical state. It's a conservative state. And the governor's politics line up well with Iowa. But I even saw, I spoke at a caucus there on his behalf, and I saw it firsthand. Caucus goers were coming up to me, but also to other people. Everyone had the same story who was in Iowa. Mm-hmm. They would come up to us knowing that we were there on behalf of Governor DeSantis and say, I really love Governor DeSantis. Mm-hmm. I love your guy. I think he's the best governor in America. I think he should be president one day. It's just we can't do it right now. We gotta stand behind President Trump. He's being attacked. He's doing it for us, and we need to stand with him. And there was almost like this guilt factor that if they didn't stand with Trump, they were letting him down. And so that was the hard part to overcome. And I'm not sure how you overcome that, to be honest with you, especially when they're telling you how much they like DeSantis and they think he needs to be president one day. So
not his time.
Right. So if Trump was not in this race, I think DeSantis would be the clear victor in the Republican primary. But the timing was just off right now.
Who's going to win the presidential election in November?
Oof, tough one. It just depends how you who the Democrats run. I think is part of it. I mean, I'm not sure Biden can make it to November as a candidate. So do they put Kamala in, or at the convention do they swap out for a Gavin Newsom or someone else? It depends. I think Trump can beat Biden. If Biden stays on the ballot, I do believe that Trump is a strong enough candidate to beat Biden. But there's a real lack of excitement, I think, about having another rematch between these two candidates. So it's going to be whoever can motivate their base to turn out. And if you look at Iowa, one of the concerns, or maybe the canary in the coal mine that we had was that, almost half of the voters turned out that we expected to turn out. And we don't know is that lack of excitement to vote for Trump.
Oh, really?
Is that an inevitability that was created?
That's a chronic Democrats problem.
Yeah. Or was it?
I mean, but you had crazy record weather too.
But Iowans are tough. They the snow had stopped by then, so it was just cold. And
right.
they don't seem too fazed by the cold. I thought it was amazingly cold, but is it depends on what was the cause of low turnout. Is it low excitement about Trump? Was it the news networks were creating a Trump victory inevitability, and that caused people who were DeSantis or Haley supporters to stay home because they thought their vote wasn't going to be worth anything? The fact that the news networks called the election right at 7 p.m. when some people were still in caucusing. All of these factors came into play of why the turnout was so low, but we don't know to what extent each one played a role. And so that's the fear, going into November. But I think President Trump will beat Joe Biden.
We'll be right back with Nick Iarossi. We have a new email address, and we'd love to hear from you. To reach us and give us your input, tell us what you'd like to hear. Tell us what you thought about what you already heard. Tell us how fabulous we are. Join the Deeper Divas team. Send an email to podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. That's podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. And I promise I will read everyone. Do you think that the campaign, the DeSantis campaign, it was like death by 1,000 cuts in the media too. There was this campaign manager left, and then 2 days later there was a new one, and then these people fought with the other. They almost came to fisticuffs, and it was just like every day there was some in an administration that is plays their cards very close to the vest in Tallahassee in the Capitol. They don't leak. They do not take a leak. And it was very different on the national stage and with national reporters who are very tenacious.
They are. So I think everyone learned a lot on this campaign. Remember, this is his first time running. Most people who become president lost one time. And you learn a lot from that first campaign. And I think this campaign's no different. People really learned a lot in this campaign. Governor DeSantis himself said that if he were to do this over again, he would have gone back and deployed a different press strategy. He would have talked to every outlet he could and got as much press time as he possibly could, because he saw the benefits with Trump of that earned media strategy. And Trump is a master at getting earned media, and Trump's team is very effective. But this is their third time doing it, so they've got it down to a science. They were effective because they knew what they should and shouldn't do in order to be effective, and they deployed it this time and did it very well. So I think that the media strategy is certainly one. There's turmoil between, in campaigns, especially presidential ones, every campaign. Was this one different than others? I don't think so. I mean, you hear about infighting between campaigns and super PACs and all that stuff all the time, and people having differences of opinions. I do think that when James Uthmeyer came in, who I got to admit, I was surprised that he was going to be the campaign manager, because he had never run one before.
Right.
But he did an amazing job.
He was the governor's chief of staff. He was also, I believe, his general counsel
before being chief of staff. Super bright guy, super loyal guy.
That doesn't mean you're a great campaign manager.
Right, we just had no experience doing it. But what the campaign needed is
But
someone
he
to right
also
the ship.
came in at a time, when the campaign was in a shambles.
There was a lot of turmoil.
Maybe
going
not a
on at
word
the
that
time.
you would want to.
Yeah, I wouldn't say shambles, but
Right.
it needed somebody to come in.
It was a
and right the
rocky
ship.
time. How about that?
He was the perfect guy to do it, and did a really good job, and learned on the job. So was really impressed with the job he did. And I would say that donors, especially that I was dealing with, and other folks who've been involved in campaigns and in this campaign, was very impressed with what James was able to accomplish when he came in.
Let's shift a little. What impact do you think it had on the legislative session for the governor to drop out of the race and come back to Tallahassee midway through not midway, but weeks into the legislative session?
Yeah, I mean, it had a pretty dramatic impact. To be honest, I think while he was campaigning, the legislature was going along, fairly smoothly
right.
with their priorities, and the governor hadn't been weighing in much. He had some. I mean, he was definitely not an absentee governor during that time, but when he got back, he had obviously more time to really sit down and look at what was being proposed on various pieces of legislation and weigh in. So I think probably the legislature was hoping that he would stay distracted on the campaign trail. And be able to kind of pass their priorities without much of the governor's input. But of course, when he came back, he's still the governor. He's going to be the governor for almost 3 more years, and he's a popular governor.
He's a very strong governor,
very strong. I mean, the strongest I've seen.
Yeah, I say he's the most powerful governor in modern Florida history.
Certainly, and I would say probably one of the most powerful governors in history. I mean, when you really look at any state, certainly out of all the governors that are out there right now, he's the most powerful governor in the country. And I would argue, I can't think historically who would have been more powerful than Ron DeSantis, and had more of an impact on the conservative movement, particularly when you look at what he's done to get people to move to Florida because of his COVID policies. And then when you look at the fact that we've got, when he ran back in 18, I think Republicans were outnumbered in voter registration by Democrats by around 500,000 voters. And now Republicans outnumber Democratic registrations by 830,000.
Yeah, I know.
And that's because of Ron
800.
DeSantis.
Yeah.
I mean, he won his re-election by almost 20%.
He's very popular. I go by the cable guy.
Yeah.
The cable guy. I ask him, I'm not into politics. I tell him what I do for a living. I'm not into politics. Oh, Governor DeSantis did. Oh, I love
love
Ron DeSantis.
They
They
love
do love him.
They love
It's really interesting, an interesting phenomenon.
Well, because he's authentic and he does what he says he's going to do. That's the big difference, is that everyone, the general public is tired of your stereotypical politician who says one thing and does another. And, whether you agree with Ron DeSantis's policies or not, you have to give the guy credit that he does what he says he's going to do, and he follows through, and he's relentless.
How many times a day do you talk to him?
Oh, no, I don't talk to him on a daily basis.
You don't?
I would say, I try not to bother him. He's got to do his job. I connect with him every couple of weeks or so.
Talking about him weighing in on legislation, one of the House Speaker, Paul Renner's top legislative priorities is the social media bill to ban teenagers from having social media accounts and other guardrails for social media use. The House and Senate both passed a kind of a slimmed down version of the House's proposal in time for the governor to have to act on it so that they could maybe come back and address it and not have to do a special session. So we are recording this on a Wednesday afternoon. The scuttlebutt on the fourth floor is that the governor there's negotiations going on right now, and the governor is going to veto it, and he's going to be, I don't know whether in his veto letter proscriptive enough, but that he is letting them know what he does not like about the bill, or what he thinks is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
That I have heard a lot of Republicans say you can't have it both ways. You either want parental rights or not, and so he wants something in the bill that would allow parents to give permission for their kids to have social media accounts.
Yeah, look, this is a classic battle of dueling philosophies, but strong philosophies of two people and two leaders, right? Both the governor and Paul Renner, the Speaker of the House, are very principled guys. They really are. They do things for the right reasons, and they do things because it's what they believe in their heart. Paul Renner believes we should ban social media for anyone under 16 years old, keep them off of TikTok and Insta and all these other harmful apps. And it should be an absolute ban under 16 years old, and that's the bill that he passed. And he feels very strongly about that, to protect our youth, and he's coming from a place of good. The governor is a huge parental rights guy. If you look at COVID, how he governed during COVID was, parents can decide whether their kids are going to wear masks, whether they're going to school. Let the parents decide all these things. Government should not be so heavy-handed that they overrule what a parent thinks best for their child. So he believes that you can have a ban on the social media piece, but that a parent can decide to overrule that ban. In other words, a parent can allow for a child to use these social media sites. So that's really the difference that's going on. It's hard to prognosticate exactly what's going to happen, but
let's do it.
But let's do it for fun. We'll see if we're accurate on Sunday. I think the governor does veto the bill, but I'm hopeful that they come back and pass this session a compromise that both of these guys can live with. I know they're talking, they're good friends, there's a lot of respect between the two because they come from a place of principle, so there's a respect there. So I'm gonna predict that the bill gets vetoed, but I'm also going to predict that they pass an alternate version before the end of session that they can both live
before the end of the regular session. Yes. Okay, so around this time of the year, there's always rumors that they're either one side is going to finish up and go home early, or that they're going to extend because they can't finish on time. So what say you? Finish on time.
And that might be hopeful thinking on my part, but so far I think things are looking good.
And how about a special session? Do we see a special session on anything? The
Not
governor
yet,
said today
or
yesterday that Citizens is not solvent. So that's a big deal. We've got over 1 million Floridians that are that Citizens is their property insurer.
And a potentially active hurricane season. So those special sessions are typically the result of some outside force. So if we have a big hurricane or an active hurricane season, that could cause citizens to be deficient in the ability to pay out claims. Of course, that will cause a special session. And then this is Florida. things happen all the time.
It is Florida. It is
So,
because Florida.
It's because Florida, we never know when we're going to have a special session. It could pop up for any particular reason that we can't possibly predict.
What other bills I'm following on? Just tell me what else you think is of importance during the session. Vacation rentals. This is the perennial food fight. I don't know if are you involved in that again this year? You have
It's possible that could actually pass this year. I mean, it's in the mix. It's in the mix. And Kathleen Pasadomo, our Senate President, this has been a priority of hers to get done over the years. So it's possible that might go through. Of course, Kathleen, speaking of Pasadomo, who's a great negotiator in her own right, by the way, and she got across the finish line early last week, her Live Healthy proposal.
That's right.
Which is a huge deal. An $800 million, I think, or $700 million deal to recruit physicians and healthcare professionals, get more of them licensed because of our growing population. We don't have
facing a healthcare provider shortage in the coming years.
And it's good foresight on her part. It's not sexy, right? But it's something that needs to be done. And she took that on. It's great policy and something that needs to be done. And that's a huge undertaking. Her top priority. She got done this session already.
Yeah, she did get that done. She got the House to go along with.
Yeah, and I think the governor's going to sign it. So it's
oh, really?
A big deal for her.
How about vaping and hemp? Those, are you on either of those?
Familiar with both of those.
Sure.
It's interesting. The vaping bill is still in the mix, but it's got some hiccups about whether or not it's just banning flavored vapes and how many people it's going to put out of business, and whether there's access to flavored vapes outside of the Chinese vapes that that folks are trying to ban because they're worried about it because they're not FDA approved and for health reasons. So I'd put it 50-50 right now, whether that passes or not. On the hemp bill, I think that one will pass. That's been on the table for the last couple of years. That bill would ban these Delta 8 and Delta 9 shops.
Products,
gas station products that you're seeing
that you
everywhere.
get basically stoned to the bone from without having to go through all the rigmarole of getting a medical marijuana.
Like the medical marijuana market. So I think that's another one that's got a better than 50-50 chance of passing this.
Yeah, I think lawmakers are like, and we've heard a lot of people come up and say, you're going to put us out of business. You're going to put us out of business. It's 10,000, manufacturers and shop owners. And I think lawmakers are and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but my sense is they're kind of like, too bad, so sad.
I haven't been that close to it. I haven't lobbied on that bill. But yeah, I think a lot of lawmakers feel that way, but also, to the folks that are in that industry, in that hemp business. And this is part of the problem. Like, if you feel like there's a glitch in the law, it's important that the legislature come back and act quickly, because if it goes on for a couple of years and it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry with lots of jobs and infrastructure around it, it gets harder and harder to ban those types of industries once there's a big constituency. And I think that's why
that's right. The
that's
genie,
why that bill's not
you
just
can't put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, these shops are everywhere.
They're everywhere,
yeah, and you see a big billboard or the signs for them as you're coming into the Capitol. So let's see. What's on your radar?
I mean, right now we're in the midst of budget negotiations, which is the most, one of our most important things.
Sure, getting your clients' projects and funding for.
Yeah, a lot of funding. Nursing home rate increases. We're trying to get a big number there because it's a real deficiency in funding there. That's can cause quality concerns for our aging population. We have a lot of big environmental projects that represent, as you know, the Everglades Trust and Everglades Foundation. So we're always pushing for money. I mean, Governor DeSantis has changed the dynamic in that regard. I mean, no governor's ever done more for clean water in the Everglades than he has in history.
Yeah.
And I also give credit to Paul Renner and to Kathleen Pasadomo in that not only have they funded the Everglades restoration projects, but they've taken a huge chunk of the Seminole Gaming Compact money we expect to get and put it toward clean water and land acquisition for environmental purposes. I give these folks credit because they're looking ahead at what Florida's
Sometimes it's hard to do that when you're a leader. You want to grab the shiny object right in front of you so you can say, look, we did this.
Right, and especially you're trying to run for the next office and you're trying to do whatever's going to give you the most short-term attention as opposed to what's going to benefit the state 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And these leaders have. They've really looked ahead, and I give them credit for that.
Well, thank you for that. Any other major things that we should be looking for in the last? Any Hail Marys that are going to come out in the last? Yes, I think Vicky. Oh, the defamation bill is dead, not dead.
Yeah, I think that one is not moving anymore.
Okay. How about marijuana THC caps?
I
Dead?
think that one's not moving anymore either.
All right. Anything else?
That's about it.
And we went through all the things I'm covering and more. All right. So before I let you go, will Governor DeSantis help Donald Trump on his re-election campaign?
Yes, I believe he will. It looks clear that Donald Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. He's a far better choice than Joe Biden or anyone that the Democrats would put up. And yeah, I expect Governor DeSantis to help. I expect all of us to help.
Well, Nick Iarossi, the founder of Capital City Consulting, here in your office, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be with you.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.